can do a lot, can't it?
で、これはやっぱり僕が今まで夢見てきたことをなんか
As a controller,
可能性を感じたんですね。
the Wii Remote does a lot of what I have always dreamed of for many long years.
でこのハードはね、別に他のハードで作れるゲームを作れることも大事なんですけども、
Now, of course, it's important for us to make hardware
他のハード
that
で
is compatible for software that's also designed for other systems.
それがすごく重要なんです。
But even more important is the ability
で、世の中
of
の
our
ゲーム
hardware to
デザイナーの
provide
皆さんに
all game creators with the opportunity to create new kinds of entertainment that could never be realized with other systems. And we're committed to providing this opportunity to all of you, all the game designers around the world.
ここで得た経験はどんどん次のエンターテインメントのために
And of course,
そういうふうに考え
this is Nintendo's mission, and we're also going to continue to use all of our experience to try to create new and better kinds of entertainment for everyone as well.
まあ任天堂はこうして割とインターフェースにね注目して技術革新をして
Now, as you know, Nintendo's definition of technical progress often focuses on new forms of interface for console games.
もっとこう幅広いジャンルの仕事にも
But in fact, we keep the same kind of viewpoint for projects of much wider genres.
これは私の
This is my house.
嘘です。
I'm lying.
これは京都にある任天堂の京都にある
This is actually a museum. It's a place called Shiguruden in Kyoto, which is the same city as Nintendo's headquarters.
シゲルデンじゃないシグレ
Shigeruden. It's not Shigeruden. Shiguruden.
ビデオゲームとは全然関係ないんですけどね
But this place has nothing to do with video games.
日本の昔の和歌っていうのがあるんですね。その
It's a
和歌とカードをこう組み合わせた
it's a museum
伝統的な遊びで
for Hyakunin Isshu, a game that blends playing cards and ancient Japanese poetry. Cards like these.
これいろんなメーカーがあるんですけども
Many companies make these cards, and Nintendo is one of them.
でこれを博物館のアトラクションを一昨年
I was actually put in charge of producing the attractions for this facility a year or two ago.
でもしかしたら皆さんのふるさとにもある同じような博物館
Now, maybe all of you have a poetry museum in your hometown.
違う作りになってます。
But even if you do, I think this one is a little different.
ダーンとですね。床全体に70枚の
You see, verses of classic poems are displayed on 70 45-inch LCD television screens on the floor of the exhibition hall.
でこうみんな専用の DS をもらって
And when you enter the museum, each visitor gets their own modified form of a Nintendo DS,
でこれが全部ホスト
which you walk around the museum with.
自分の位置を
And each DS is connected to a host computer, so it understands and knows your location within the museum.
でこうボタンを押すと床のカルタが変わったりするんですね。
You can press buttons on the DS to change the cards that are appearing on the screen at your feet.
この写真ちょっと暗いですけど
There's a little bit of this photo is a little bit dark,
開発中のセットです。
but you can see that this is a prototype of the system in development.
ちっちゃいテレビをいっぱい並べて
You can see the smaller TV screens down below.
でこうしてこういう仕事ってすごい楽しいんですね。エンジニアと一緒にやる仕事
So
は。
creating something like this was very fun for our team, working with the engineers.
でこの仕組みを使ってもっといろんなことをやるんですが、これが専用の
Of course,
DS
using this system, you can do a lot of different
で
things.
この後ろに見えてるのは
This is an example of the DS that you get there, and what you see in the background is an aerial photo of the city of Kyoto.
実際こう車が走ったり飛行機が飛んだりするのを
And you can actually see cars driving on the streets and airplanes flying through the air.
でこれでこの上をこう歩き回るとまるで自分がこう京都
So you can
の
actually
上を歩き回
walk
ってるような気が
above this aerial view as if you're walking over the city of Kyoto.
でそしていろんな名所を
And of course, you can visit all of Kyoto's hottest tourist attractions.
でこのプロジェクトに参加したメンバーはねすごいいくつかの楽しい経験をし
So
ま
I
し
have to say that for the members of our team who worked on this, it was enjoyable for a number of reasons.
た動き回れるこう大きな
First of all, it was kind of like a large-scale form of entertainment that players themselves
この中
actually
の
walk
ソ
around
フ
in.
トウェアではこう全然エンディングとか
And of
そういう必
course,
要がないんですね
since it wasn't technically a game, we didn't have to worry about figuring out how the game would end.
まあここでもね一番嬉しかったのはこの施設がこう世代間のギャップ
But I think the most rewarding part of this whole experience
で和歌っていうのは
was seeing
大体
how this
こう
bridges the gap
お年
between
寄りの方が
generations.
好むもので普通は
See, these kinds of poems are generally of interest only to the elderly,
DS とか
but by adding
とか使うことで
the interactive elements and the familiarity of the DS interface,
装置を使うとおじいさんおばあさんと
grandchildren and even great-grandchildren
一緒に遊んでくれ
are
る
more than happy to come along to this museum with their older family members.
だから僕たちが
So our priority with this project
えっと
was really to provide young people and people with other interests the opportunity to touch and learn about traditional culture. And to us, this was more important than simply offering more detailed information to those who already had good knowledge of the
今の
poems.
ところうまくいってますね
And so far, it appears that things are going quite well.
でこれはユーザー拡大の第一歩をまた踏み出したのか
The facility is attracting the audiences we attended, and we feel that maybe we're expanding an entertainment audience in a new way.
そして任天堂法人ビジョンの最後です
So this leads me to the last element of Nintendo's corporate vision that I need to talk about today, and that's risk.
で山内の時代から僕ら従業員はいつ
Now,
も
since the days when Mr. Yamauchi was our president,
人と違うことをしなさい
we have always encouraged employees to do things differently from everyone
違うことを
else.
するっていうのは新しいリスク
Now, of course, when you take new challenges,
それほどリスクになります
you take a risk. The bigger the challenge, the bigger the risk.
リスクを覚悟してビデオゲームを
So Nintendo prepared itself for that risk,
それをずっと考えてきました
and we took on the challenge of questioning our own definition of what a video game is.
まあ任天堂の DS はまあ分かりやすい例ですね
A good example of this is the nature of the Nintendo DS and its
ジェネレー
interface,
ションズって呼んでるのが分かりやす
as
い
well as the wide array of software that appears on it in the form of the Touch Generations titles.
こういうふうに心を満たしてくれるようなものもありますしね
Now, some of these games may be good for your soul,
でまたはこうなんか実用的で
some may be practical, good for your brain.
まあどちらもその面白いというのは前提なんですけどね
But even when we're making these games, our ultimate goal is to make them fun.
けどまあこの Wii の設計というのは本当に今までと比
But
べ
in
て
my experience, none of our risks has ever rivaled the design of the Wii.
ゲームキューブは正直なところね
Now, frankly,
人口拡大とは思ったんですけど
GameCube was really just a half
正義だ
step
ったと思いました
in working towards an expanded audience. It wasn't enough.
ユーザーにアピールしたいと
It
思
was
って
technically advanced, but I wanted it to also appeal to a wider audience.
こうコントローラーなんかも
So that's why in the design of the controller,
つけたんですね
I requested that we make the A button larger
で色も変えました
and a different color.
で誰でも気楽に遊び始めれるよこれで
So that way it would be easy for anybody to pick it up and immediately know how to start playing.
結果的にはこのインターフェースでもゲームをしない人にはとても
But in the
だ
end, I still think that this interface was too complicated for people who weren't
で
gamers.
すから Wii ではリスクを覚悟して新しいゲーマーを迎え
So with the Wii, we had to decide,
これからまだ
do we continue to take this risk of trying to attract new gamers?
諦めてもっと高性
Or do
能
we give up and simply evolve our hardware in the same way that we always have done in the
こ
past?
れはもう問題なく我々はもっと新しいことをやっ
But
て
of course, we dared to take the greater risk.
で正直言って僕自身も不安があったんですね
But in all honesty,
こう
there were concerns, even for me.
こう両手でこう遊ぶコントロ
I
ー
mean,
ラー
after
僕
all,
らが作って10年以上使って
You know, for the last 20 years, we've been playing with and even ourselves creating controllers that required you to hold them with two hands.
慣れてきたんですね
So, you know, we'd gotten too used to that.
でこれをこう外すわけですから
And now we're just going to free our hands, take it apart.
で開発の期間中ずっと僕の大きな仕事は社内
So while development was going on,
弁護士のような仕事です
I found myself acting as kind of an evangelist
でプロデュー
inside
サ
the
ー
company.
とあっては最終的には
I would meet with our
コン
producers,
トローラーで
and I
何
would
か
tell
できな
them
くなるものがあるっていうことを考えるんじゃなくて
that in the end, you have to think not about what's going to be lost,
でそっちに未来を感じようよという話をしてま
but
す
think about what's going to be gained.
でこう話をしながらだんだん僕自身が説得されていく
So gradually, as we did this, I managed to give myself confidence.
岩瀬さんともこう何度も話しましたで
And of course, I
岩瀬さん
spoke
と
with
話をす
Mr.
ると
Iwata about this many
だんだん
times.
こう落ち着いてくるんですけども
And the more we talked about it together,
こう一人になるとちょっと不安になって
the better we both felt. But then when we would separate and go off and
けどまあ
do our
去年の
things,
E3
those concerns would return.
去年の E3 で僕は本当にそういう
To be honest, it wasn't until last spring at E3 when we saw the long lines
これですね
and the happy faces of the people coming out of our booth.
本当に幸せそうな顔してみんな出てきてくれるんですね
Look at this.
本当に良かったなと思います
That was the moment when we knew that this risk was worth taking.
じゃあこの人
We better cover up his face too.
どっかいませんか
Are any of you in these photos?
でまあ企業のビジョンはねとても大切なんですけどもね
So, you know, corporate vision is, of course, essential.
人が作るわけですからね
But corporations don't make video games. People do.
というわけで、任天堂ビジョンの話から
So let me move from the vision of Nintendo
私が
to the vision I have always employed
個人的に
personally
話をしていく。
in my career as a game developer.
私はインタビュー
In
で
interviews,
こうよくゲーム
I'm
の
often asked about specific elements in my games.
でそのキャラクターはあるいはそのハードの
Where did you get the idea for that character or that hardware?
でどうしてそういうレベルデザインをしたの
Why did you design that level in that way?
でそういった人々の質問の一つずつの
And sometimes I can tell that the people who are asking these questions
彼らが理解をしたとしても
have spent a lot of time analyzing my games in very detailed fashion to search for the answers. But the riddle here is that the harder they look at the individual parts of the game itself, the further away they get from determining that
なぜ
answer.
かっていうとね、僕自身が
The reason for this
開発の時に注目
is that my initial focus
開発中
and my primary focus throughout development
ゲームのその個々の要素
is not these individual elements of the game.
でゲームを作る時の僕の方法はその
When I'm creating a game, what I always try to envision,
これは考えるんですけどもね
it's what I always think about, is the core element of fun within the
そ
game.
のゲームでもその時ゲームをこうプレイしてる人の顔
And to do that, I imagine one thing,
これをずっとイメージしてます
and that's the face of the player while he or she is experiencing the
顔
game,
に現れるんです
not any individual part of the game itself. And what the players will feel will be reflected on their face.
で僕は彼らを楽しませたい
And as an entertainer, I want them to be entertained.
で任天堂 DS の発売の前に、日本で
I was reminded of this recently when we launched the Nintendo DS in Japan and first put the system out in public for people to start playing.
ちなみにこれはね、マイファーストタッチ DS
We asked some of those people if we could videotape them, and you can see some of these videos the first time they're playing the DS at a website called My First Touch DS. So let's take a look at two cuts that impressed me most.
ちょっと見ましょう
Let's take a quick look. So cute.
これ彼は嬉しいんですね彼女が反応してるから
That guy there is happy because his girlfriends are so excited. And of course, his grandfather is happy that his granddaughter is having so much fun as well.
ペンなんで自分でも触れますよね
And since it's a stylus, a touch pen, he's able to play the game too.
はいご覧いただいて分かるように遊んでる
So, as you can see, not only is the person who's playing the game being entertained, but the people standing around watching are getting caught up in the excitement, and they're being entertained as well.
僕の進みたい道だと思う
And that made me very happy. That's the reaction that I always want.